I'm going to start on the far right with some early Texas Instruments calculators. This is the TI-30. You see one up here in its case. By the way, all the calculators you'll see here are working calculators. I have owned other calculators, but threw them away or sold them over the years. I retained this one, I think in part because it was a kind of sentimental favorite. It was one of the very early, let me turn it on and give you a demonstration. 258 times 147, and as you see, it still works. And it was, of course, a 4-function LED calculator, and was not the first calculator that I ever owned, but it was one of the first ones that I used with any kind of regularity. And one of the reasons was for engineering. It contained things like the trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent. It could work in degrees, radians, and let me turn it off. Degrees, radians, or gradients. It did things like y to the x and the ln of x and the log and so on. It also would work in engineering notation. It was really a neat calculator for the engineer in its day. Moving over a little bit to the left, I come to the TI-36. This is the 36X Solar, but there was a whole line of these. They were very nice and had basically the same functions as the TI-30. They were a little bit faster, and of course they had the LCD screen, and they had the photo array to power, so they're called solar powered, but basically it's light powered. I'm inside right now, and this one is running off of the incandescent lights. You may notice that it's on. You can't really turn it off, and you'll see that on some others. Some solar calculators, as soon as it receives enough light, the calculator comes on, sometimes in a funny state, and you have to clear it, but nonetheless it comes on. Above that is sort of the mainstay of middle school and high schools today. This is the TI-84 Plus Silver Edition. I very recently gave my granddaughter the CE, which is the color edition of this same one. If you are in middle school or even in high school, and you're looking for a calculator that will fit in real well and is liked by the teachers and is supported, I have to say, and I tutor in both middle and high schools, I have to say the TI-84 and successive generations of the TI-84 is sort of the basic calculator for that area, or I should say the basic advanced calculator, because this is a graphing calculator. So unlike the 36X, for example, this can actually do graphs. The color edition can do graphs in color. TI has recently brought out a new, recently, some time ago, brought out the TI Nspire, and later I'm going to compare this one to a couple of other very advanced calculators with a focus on engineering students at the college level. But for now, I'll just say this is a more advanced version of the TI-84. It's faster, it has a lot of other features, it can graph. I'm going to now reposition the camera and come over to the middle and look at some of the Casio and some of the Sharp models. This is the Sharp business financial calculator. It also does some of the basic other functions, but it does some neat internal rate of return, costing, etc., financial functions. I used this calculator when I was getting my MBA degree, and it came in rather handy for doing all those kinds of calculations. Above it is a newer Sharp Scientific. That's the let's see, it's called the EL5371G, I think, if I'm reading that right. And it's a nice low price calculator if you're looking for kind of an entry model. It gets pretty good reviews. I frankly have little experience with this. I bought it in part because I was in a tutoring situation where some people were using this calculator, and I bought one just so I'd be able to do some of the problems on this calculator. But it's not something that I've ever used regularly, either in education or in professional use. Over to the left is one I just threw in for personal reasons. It's the CX1. It's called the Pathfinder. It's made by ASA. This is a flight computer. It does all of the basic calculations that you need to plan a flight. Things like it computes, for example, wind correction and all of those sorts of things. And I only threw that in because for those of you who might either be pilots or are considering it, this is a nice little calculator. There are better ones today, but this is the one that I used as a student pilot, and works pretty well. Okay, let's move now over to the left and look at some Casios, and then finally at Hewlett-Packards. On the left here is the FX850 Solar. I really only include this because it's a fairly nice, very low priced calculator, and it has what I call the Casio new look. You see here the blue keys for clear and all clear, here for delete and all clear, and on the CG50 we'll look at in a second. So, but it's a nice low-priced calculator. Obviously, it doesn't do a lot of advanced functions. The next one up, this one is frankly my favorite, what I would call modern basic calculator. It's the ClassWiz FX991EX, if I remember right. Yeah, I think that's it. This is really a wonderful calculator, and believe it or not, it only costs $15. The first calculator I ever bought cost $500, scientific calculator, cost $500, and did about 1/100th of what this one does. Once again, I'm not going to be talking about each individual calculator and how to operate it and so on. Where I'm really leading with this is to a comparison, as I said earlier, of 3 top-end calculators for engineering students in electrical engineering today. So, moving up from that to the CG50. The CG50 is actually the culmination of a series that also includes this unit, the FX9750G Plus. A whole lot of good calculators in this line. It's a very nice graphing calculator, and in terms of performance per dollar, probably one of the best calculators on the market today. To the right of it is a Casio FX3000 ES. Once again, this is one that I bought for compatibility in a situation, and I haven't used it that much, but it does have the advantage that it's solar powered. So, very nice little calculator. A calculator that frankly saved my bacon in engineering school, particularly when I was taking control theory and advanced control theory in graduate school, is this Casio. This is the FX850P. The thing about it is it was programmable in BASIC, and I had set it up with programs to solve matrices and other things. We're talking 1970s here, and it allowed me to do things that in a minute that would have taken me half an hour to do by hand, and I would have made at least 3 mistakes. So it really saved me a lot, both in homework and on my tests. And yes, I did clear this with the professor to use on exams. There were several other students that were using similar and sometimes even more advanced models. So that then leads me to the one here at the back, which is the Casio CG500, sometimes also called the Classpad 2, and there's another Classpad 2 called the CP400, and we'll talk about that when we look at this one in more detail. Let me move over now to the left and finish up this overall comparison of calculators with the Hewlett-Packard. This is the Hewlett-Packard 18C Business Consultant. Once again, this is one of the two calculators I used in business school when I was finishing an MBA. This was a very, very useful calculator, but it really is a calculator intended for engineers who go back to get an MBA like me, rather than for an ordinary business student, because it actually had many of the quirks of the early HP calculators that really it's more aimed at an engineer. It was sort of designed by engineers, and although they didn't say so, sort of for engineers. But it's a great business calculator. It does a bit more than the one I showed you earlier, the Sharp, that does things. This will also do things like internal rate of return and so on, but this will generate amortization schedules. Anyway, it's a wonderful calculator. A little out of date today, but helped me a lot in business school. The one above it is one of the HP, and I had several there. I had an HP 35, which is sort of a classic, but unfortunately it died a few years ago. This is, let me open it up because there's more to it than this side shows. This is the 28C, probably the most powerful calculator, scientific calculator of its day. It really was good. It was fast. It did a lot of things, and I used this in later graduate school, but more importantly, after I got out of school, and then when I went back to finish my PhD, I used this calculator quite a bit. It's a great little calculator. I would say that it's out of date, but frankly it's not, except that in my mind it has been superseded by this calculator. This is the HP Prime. Fine calculator today, and I'm going to be comparing in the next segment the HP Prime with the Casio Classpad and the TI Nspire we saw earlier. So enough about all of this. If you're interested in a kind of overview of calculators, much better than what I've given here, I suggest you go to Mike's Radio Shop and look at his two-part comparison. He compares, oh gosh, I won't even try to count the number of calculators, but maybe 10 times as many as I've shown here. So let me line up to compare the three, what I regard as contenders for a double E student today. I was asked by a student a few weeks ago to recommend a calculator for a double E student, somebody either just beginning or moving into the middle portion of a double E curriculum at the sophomore, junior level. And I would suggest one of these three. On the left is the HP Prime. In the middle is the Casio Classpad, and in a minute I'll talk about a little comparison of this particular Classpad with the Classpad 400. And on the right is the TI Nspire CX CAS. Now, all three of these have computer algebra system, which I would recommend. It's very useful, not just in engineering, but also when you're taking math courses, calculus, differential equations, etc. But for a modern curriculum in electrical engineering, I believe that it is essential that an engineer today be able to work easily with Laplace transforms in addition to all the other math functions that exist, trig and geometry and all of the other things. For that reason, I suggested to the student that he purchase a Casio Classpad, either the CP400 or the CG500. Let me explain a little bit of the difference. The CG500 uses the CG designation, which Casio tends to use to stand for color graphic, whereas the CP400, which is virtually identical to this unit, is from the CP stands for Classpad. I don't know why they didn't call this the Classpad 500. Maybe they didn't want to, I don't know. It's not the same appearance as the Classpad 400. It's more the appearance of some of the CG line. So maybe it was that. At any rate, I won't speculate further. Let me tell you why I would choose this one over the others. I find the ability in the Classpad, including the 400 and the 500, to have a dual window where you have equations at the top and graphing or keyboard or other things at the bottom to be superior to calculators with smaller windows like the TI Nspire and the HP Prime. However, I will tell you that my personal favorite is the HP Prime, maybe because I have more experience with it. I only recently got the CG500, whereas I've had the Prime for some time. And the one thing the Prime has, in addition to being faster than any other calculator I've shown you, is the ability to use the interactive screen. You can pinch and squeeze to zoom in. You can pinch and expand to zoom out. And or I should say, I got those reversed. In other words, to look more closely at a spot, you pinch and spread your fingers in a diagonal. To look at more screen, you pinch and squeeze your fingers together on a diagonal. Once again, I say I'm not going to try to show you how to use these calculators, but this is a wonderful calculator, and it does a real good job with Laplace transforms, although there are a few little quirks, and maybe at some point, if there's some desire for that, I might show how each of these calculators are used for Laplace transforms and inverse Laplace transforms. But that seems like a bit of an esoteric topic for anybody who's not a EE student or a practicing engineer. You might ask, well, why didn't you recommend the Nspire? I think this is a wonderful calculator. However, the calculator does not come with any basic Laplace transforms, Fourier transforms, or any of that, whereas the Casio and the HP both do. There are programs you can download, applications they call them. They're third party, they're not supplied by TI, and frankly the process is a little bit, well, let's just say involved. You can screw things up, you can even mess up your operating system while trying to do all of that. And so I wrote TI and asked them, am I missing something? Is there a Laplace function anywhere in the Nspire? And they said, no, there's not. And their message implied, though it didn't directly state that they've never put that in a TI calculator, and apparently they don't intend to. So for that reason, I don't recommend the Nspire CAS calculator or the Nspire CX without CAS calculator for EE students. However, if you've already got one and you want to add Laplace transform functionality, you can do so by getting a library called SpecFunc, SPECFUNC. Once again, I'm not going to show you that, but you can download that. And once you have that on your calculator, which is no easy feat, then you can do Laplace transforms on that. So I hope this gives you an idea of why I think that the Casio Classpad and the HP Prime, each of them have advantages and disadvantages, partly because of the dual screen. I am starting to move toward the Casio Classpad, but I've been a real fan of the HP Prime, so I would stick with that. If the Nspire had built-in functions like Laplace and Fourier and so on, then I would probably consider all three of these roughly equal. But as it is, I would give a slight nod to this one because it frankly, to me, looks like, for the dollar, the best value and the best performer on the market today. Well, that's one man's humble opinion, and I can't claim to be an expert on any of this. I do have a lot of experience in engineering and engineering management and research and all of that. I'm not a professional educator. I've taught graduate seminars and other things, but I've never been a full-time professor, so I can't say that I'm looking at this from the professor's point of view, more from the point of view of an engineer with a few, well, let's just say too many war stories. Okay, well, that's going to wrap up this video. As I usually do, I ask you to look for some more videos in the future, and in the meantime, I hope you have a nice day.